Devastated? Confused? Heartbroken? So many times in life we get thrown for a curve and don't know how to react.
I can tell you the first time I had sex, how was my marriage going to survive? It's over. I remember standing in front of the judge with my 3-week-old baby, looking at my ex. I saw the look on his face, and it was complete rage.
Welcome to When Life Throws You a Curve and How to Make the Adjustment with your host, Katie Hamilton.
Hey everyone, welcome to When Life Throws You a Curve and How to Make the Adjustment. I'm Katie Hamilton, and I'm your host for this podcast where we discuss all things related to change, challenges, and those situations in life that seem to completely blindside us and hit us out of nowhere, oftentimes leaving us confused and frustrated, brokenhearted, and wondering how in the world anything good could come from something that feels so very bad. For those of you that don't know me, I'd like to take just a minute or two and tell you a little bit about myself. Some of you may know me from my very short stint on The Real Housewives of Orange County, or from last year's Marrying Millions on Lifetime, or from a number of other television shows that I've made appearances on over the years. But I would say the vast majority of you know me from my ex-husband. He was an MVP Major League Baseball player. His name was Josh Hamilton. And I was actually married to Josh for 11 years. I was married to him for the entire duration of his major league career. But it actually wasn't until 2 years after we were married that I ever saw him hit a baseball, run on a treadmill, do anything remotely athletic. When we got married, he was not playing baseball. He was completely out of the game entirely. And I can tell you, I never thought baseball would be a part of my world in any capacity whatsoever. Baseball was not really a sport that my family was familiar with growing up. I didn't have any siblings that played baseball. We didn't go to baseball games. So I knew very, very little about the game in and of itself. I mean, I knew the basics. I knew, home run. I knew 3 strikes, you're out. I knew 9 innings. And of course, I knew the 7th inning stretch and taking me out to the ball game. But that's pretty much the extent of my baseball knowledge, and I was fine with that. I grew up a football fan. I grew up in a football-related family of sorts. My father had built a boys' home. My dad was a land developer and a real estate developer, home builder, and he had built a boys' home with the Redskins, the Washington Redskins head coach at the time, Coach Joe Gibbs, and some other businessmen in the Northern Virginia area. And it was a home that was built for troubled youth. At the time, it was boys only, called Youth for Tomorrow. And they actually have girls there now, but for the first probably 20 years, it was just boys. So there were always Redskin players over there. I was probably 4 or 5 when the boys' home was completed. And I just remember spending a lot of time there at the boys' home. My aunt was the cook, and we went to a lot of football games. So football is something I was familiar with, loved that. Baseball, I was definitely not into it. With that said, I'll tell you, over the years and over the course of, the last 2 decades, I did grow to love the game of baseball, but it was not until many, many, many years later on. But while we're on the subject of baseball, I think it's important for me to let you know that while my ex-husband's career was a complete surprise to me, and something that I never expected to be part of my life in any capacity, I truly am incredibly grateful for not just the game of baseball, although, like I said, I did grow to love it, but also for the memories that my family made during my husband's career and for our time in the game. It was definitely a wild ride, an incredible journey, and I knew it was a gift. As an athlete's wife, there are so many things that we take on behind the scenes so that our husbands can play the game that they love so much and have that career. Everything from being mom and dad because your husband's gone on the road all the time, to just making sure your household is running properly. There's a lot of responsibility that I think people really don't see. But for me, it didn't feel like a burden. I was just so happy to do any single thing I could do to help Josh have the best opportunity for success in doing something that he loved. So I counted that as an honor and a privilege. I seriously, I knew it was a gift. I cherished every single second of all of it. Every single home run felt like the first one I ever saw. I mean, literally, I about lost my mind every single time he hit a home run. I mean, of course, there's those highlights, like World Series and MVPs and accolades and awards, but none of that stuff is what made the game significant to me. The game was significant to me because I was, one, watching the man that I loved do something that he loved, and seeing him be fulfilled was very rewarding for me. And even me giving this podcast a baseball reference in the title is my, small way of paying homage to a game that I really love and just grew to adore and have so much love for in my heart. So just because we're divorced, doesn't take that chunk of my life away and erase it. But also my children and I and my ex got to just make such sweet family memories that I never could have imagined, because as I, said a minute or two ago, the season of life prior to baseball was wildly, tremendously difficult. And I'll get into all of that, in a little while later on in the coming episodes. Having said that, a lot of this podcast is about the experiences, not just in the game, but just in life, that throw us curveballs, that, things we can't be prepared for, things we could have never anticipated or imagined. But it's also about being able to see that there is really, really good stuff, even in the really hard stuff, and having a perspective of what is God, doing? How is he refining us and preparing us for our future? And what is that future that he has planned for us? I'm definitely going to dive a lot deeper into that. But before I do, I want to give you just a little bit more information and history on me personally. A little bit more about my background and where I came from. I grew up in the Northern Virginia area. My family lived in just right outside of DC, and I lived there until my high school years. My younger brother had passed away when I was 11, and he was 8. He died in a car accident, and my parents really needed a change of scenery. They were, as you can imagine, having a hard time dealing with his death. I, as a mom, I would never wish that on anyone, and I saw the agony that my parents went through during that time. And I know for them, seeing his friends and seeing like his playground and, all of the things that reminded them of him so much, it was still so fresh. And so new, just from losing him so recently, that they really needed a change of scenery to help them heal. And I know people heal in different ways and need different things, and that's just something that my parents needed. So we moved to North Carolina when I was in high school, and I actually went to public school for the first time as a sophomore, and that's actually where I met Josh. I don't know how many people out there know that I met him in high school, but we met in high school. We were not high school sweethearts or anything remotely at all related to that, but I'll delve into that a little deeper later on. But I also have 4 daughters, and sometimes I still can't believe that God gave me 4 children. I'm just very, very thankful that none of my 4 daughters are exactly like me, because I personally Whew, I was a handful. I was a handful. God bless my mother and my father. And my kids range from age 8, my youngest, Stella, all the way up to 19. And my oldest, Julia, she actually will be making some appearances on the podcast in the weeks to come. And it's kind of cool to get her perspective. Having an adult child is so different. And I tell her all the time, I'm like, you're my first. You've kind of been like the guinea pig through this whole parenting thing. Sorry about it. I'm still learning. We're all still learning and we're all still growing, but she has a lot of grace for me, so I'm very thankful. And I would say this is not my first experience as a single mother, although I am a single mom. It's actually, I think, my fourth season of life where I've been a single mom. And by single mom, I mean the sole caretaker of my children. So there is just so much that goes in that. When I was 19, I had her. I was not married. And I did not marry her father. But when she was about 18 months old, Josh and I started dating. And that didn't last for long. But we got back together about a year and a half later. And her birth father really selflessly kind of took a step back, because once Josh started playing baseball, we were not in North Carolina where her birth father was. And in order for Julia to have stability, he just allowed Josh to raise her, although it was difficult for him. He had other kids. He's very close to his other kids. And he's actually one of my best friends, one of my favorite people in this entire world. Of course, when I was married, that friendship had to change and, things were different. But after my divorce, we were able to become buddies again. And he's just a really, really good guy. And I'm so, so grateful that he allowed Josh to raise Julia. Not necessarily because of Josh's parenting skills, but just so that Julia could have stability and really feel like part of the family unit. I had a baby very shortly after I got married, and we were all Hamiltons, and Julia was a Mitchell. So that was hard for her also. So that's a little bit about Julia's birth dad in my early life. And again, I know I keep saying this, but I will delve into all of these things, everything I've referenced in great detail as we go. I'm just really trying to give you all the basics so we can kind of lay a foundation for what's coming up. So I'm going to get, as I've said about 50 times, into all of that later in the coming weeks, but I'm just wanting to lay the foundation, because in my early marriage, that's really when I had the first, curveball that rocked me in a sense of not just affecting me or me as a daughter with my parents and that family unit, but me and my children. And it's also the first time I was thrown a curveball and wanted to learn how to respond and react in a way that was going to be productive, and making the adjustment from coming unglued to, okay, Lord, what are you trying to show me through this? Change is something that I addressed, early on in this podcast, and saying that we were going to speak a lot about change and challenges. And one thing I really want to say about change right out of the gate is, so many times I hear people say, "Oh, I'm not good with change. I'm not good with change. Change is just not something I'm comfortable with." And usually I hear it in the context of, "Oh my goodness, my husband just lost his job. We may have to move out of this house. I don't want to move out of this house. I love this house. I'm not good with change. Yeah, maybe we'll figure things out, but it's just, I'm not good with change." Or, "My husband just got transferred," or if you're in baseball, traded, and we have to move across the country. And I don't want to move across the country. I don't want to leave my family. I'm not good with change. You know that about me. Always change in the context of a burden or a situation that ruffles our feathers or makes us uncomfortable. Never do you hear, never have I heard, oh my goodness, I just got engaged. I'm so excited. But, no, marriage just seems like way too much change. I know I've been praying for this man to propose to me for the last 5 years, but I just can't do it. It's just way too much change. Or I have been praying for this promotion for what feels like forever, and I finally got it, but yeah, I don't think I can take it because it's, nope, too much change. Can't do it. Not good with change. No, of course we don't hear people say that because that is something that is a blessing. It's a promotion. It's an engagement. It's something that is viewed as a positive. We only hear change in the negative when it is viewed as a burden. But change certainly can't possibly be the problem because if we think about it, change is happening all day, every day around us constantly. That's one constant is change. Time is changing, the date is changing, we're changing. Right this very second, I'm the youngest I'm ever going to be, and I'm the oldest that I've ever been. And that's true, every single second as we go. So change itself can't possibly be the problem. What's really the problem is the situations in life that hit us that make us uncomfortable. Things that make us feel out of our element or feel ill-equipped to handle or frustrated, confused, let down, disappointed. Lord, I thought you were going to, promote me by now and it's not happening, or, just whatever that is for you, whatever the discomfort or challenge or unpleasant situation that you're in, that's actually what you're not comfortable with. That's actually what I'm not comfortable with. It's those things. It's not change. So I think it's important to point out knowing what we're dealing with is a key component in knowing how to handle everything that comes with it and how to really start to see the silver linings, how to see and start to see the situation from God's perspective and asking God, Lord, okay, what are you doing? We may not get an answer right away, but if we trust that God is good and that his character is good and he can be trusted, then we can start to see that we may not know it right now or have all the answers, but we know that there is good stuff in the hard stuff, and God can and will work this for our good if we trust him and we give him all of the pieces of our brokenness so that he can make a masterpiece from it. So now we've established that change is not the enemy. Change is a reality. It's inevitable and it's happening all the time around us. I will say that the enemy will often, especially in seasons of challenge, he'll try to speak lies into us about that situation and fog our vision and give us the opposite of clarity. And if we lean in and listen to whatever he is telling us, we are going to be operating out of fear constantly rather than saying what we know to be true based on scripture and knowing that God has a plan and operating out of faith. When we operate out of faith, we are going to get to the promised land and to the destiny that God has for us so much faster with sanity and knowing that we're being perfected and refined. It is never in a season of, or rarely would I say it in a season of ease, that God is doing the refining. We all know diamonds have to have heat and pressure to become diamonds. Otherwise they're just, this unattractive rock looking thing. But there is so much personal growth that I've experienced in the hardest seasons of my life, when I've really been in the fire, that God's been able to refine me and make me more of a reflection of his son Jesus, which is definitely my goal. And in the New Testament, we're told to count trials as joy because they are developing patience. And patience, once it's had its complete work, leaves us complete, lacking nothing. So before God can have us enter our promised land and really equip us for the future that he has planned for us, which we can be assured is good. Jeremiah says, the plans I have for you are good. Before we can get there, there is usually refining that takes place, and often takes place in a painful situation, a hard circumstance, but we can rest assured that it is for our good and it's for God's glory. And the pit is never fun, but it is often a time of perfection, a time of protection, a time of preservation, where we learn perseverance, where we learn patience, that is going to get us to our promised land. So I am going to be sharing a lot of tools that I've learned over the years that have really helped me see through the lens of finding the good stuff in the hard stuff, and being able to look at the situation I'm in. And I might still lose it for a few minutes, but I always come back to what I know. What do I know is true? What is my default mode? Well, my default mode now is, okay, God, I do not like what's happening here. This is not fun. This is not good. This does not feel good. But I know that you're in control. I may not see where your hand is leading me, but I can know that I know that I can trust your heart. I know your character is good. I know you're for me. And I know that everything you have planned for me is for your good, and it's for my good, even if it doesn't feel good right now. So not only do I want to be able to pass on those tools of perspective, but also us being aware of our actions and our reactions and our responses to situations, because that often makes a huge difference on how fast we can change our focus and get into a healthy default mode and react out of faith. Additionally, when we're reacting out of faith in a season of pain, we are going to learn to make that adjustment and go from pain to our promised land. And most of the time, having a change in our responses or to the seasons of change and discomfort really does make a world of difference. And often it may be a very, very, very small change. It may be a huge change. But one thing I noticed in baseball when I would be watching pitchers and hitters, and I knew nothing about the game of baseball when I started watching it. I learned quickly because I knew I sounded like a complete idiot, and I didn't want to sound like an idiot. But I talk about that, later down the road. But one thing I did notice was these, pitchers would be, throwing strikes and, striking the hitters out over and over again. And, they strike out, walk back to the dugout, then they get their, next chance to get up there and try again. And there's only so many times they can strike out before they really start to feel, okay, I'm feeling like a failure. But often the difference between a strikeout and them hitting it out of the park was truly just a tiny little millimeter of a shift. And that oftentimes that's the same for us in our perspective. It's just a millimeter of a shift. It's very slight. And people may not notice it in the outside world of what you're doing internally, but I guarantee you they're going to notice the results of you changing your perspective and changing your reactions and changing your posture on how you view things and how you respond to things. And nobody really wants to continue striking out. We want to be able to knock it out of the park. And that's, something that we're going to talk about a lot in this podcast, just having the ability and putting into practice and to be able to make the necessary adjustments that we need to make in our lives so that we really allow us to start to extract all the good stuff from the things that are really hard, and having the attitude of perseverance, knowing that God is for us and not against us. And this time of refinement or this time of pain or this season of discomfort is serving a purpose that is so far beyond what we could ever have fathomed for our good if we really let it have its perfect work. So now that I've given you the basics of a little bit about myself and a little bit about this podcast and kind of where we're going to go, I'm going to rewind the clock about 2 decades and give you some insight and share really how Josh and I got together, the first few, months of our marriage and what it was like dating him and all of that good stuff.